Modernization of spectrum management practices includes the 4G LTE licensing, as I've mentioned before. Something that's very close on our horizon is the digital television migration. If you followed the news here recently, the Prime Minister has also made a significant announcements of this, I think 3 weeks ago. We are looking at doing our trials very soon on this, and following the trials, we'll be commencing a national rollout of a DTV platform. We've also redone the band planning for FM broadcasting. There was a limited number of national channels that were available previously, but after the band planning for FM was redone, we at the moment have about 3 national channels, and we're working further on that to free up some more spectrum. The idea is then this will then be put back, and then we will invite offers from potential broadcasters to come in and secure these for your business. And also band planning for microwave linking, given that, again, going back to the limited fiber infrastructure that is currently in place, there is a heavy reliance on microwave linking. So this is something the ministry is also cleaning up to make sure that there's significant amount of microwave links available for anyone that wishes to use them. Next slide, please. Now, coming back to the National Broadband Policy, some of the principles of the policy are it's market driven. So we at no time would want to actually intervene as government and really try to create scenarios. We would leave it to the market to determine what is required and the ISPs to respond accordingly. Of course, we'll keep an oversight on that as the regulators, and I'm glad to say at the moment the market has responded very positively. We had established minimum benchmarks. I think when we did the policy 2 years ago, our definition of broadband was something that is a high-speed internet service. The speed at that time was defined as 512 megabit per second. I'm glad to say that at the moment we've got packages that range, for example, with the connect velocity, anything between 2 to 10 megabit per second. So there's been significant growth in that, primarily through the market itself. Through the demand of the customers and through the ability of the service providers. Community involvement and ownership, this is where the government community telecenter initiative kicks in as well. Universal access, I've already talked to you a bit about that as well. So we also, including broadband services as a essential resource that should be available to all Fijians, irrespective of where they are physically located. Affordability, services need to be affordable, and they currently are, I think, based on our research, the current service for a 5 gigabyte cap package, you'd be expected to pay about $35 Fijian. I think there are cheaper packages also available for about 2 gigabyte. You could get services for about I think it's $20 Fijian a month. And leadership, this is something that needs to be driven from the top as well. I'm glad to say that we have had a very good support on this from the government sector, as well as from the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself and the Minister for Communication. They're very passionate about driving the changes when it comes to increasing broadband accessibility to all the people. Some of the goals that we had established for ourselves when we were doing the policy and how we've performed against the targets: to have in place a competitive structure for provision of broadband in Fiji. We have a highly competitive ISP sector, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. There are quite a big number of ISPs, all offering very competitive services. Support the provision of broadband services to communities that show an active interest in acquiring early broadband access. That's where the Universal Service Access Program kicks in, as well as the Government Community Telecenter Project. We receive a lot of applications from the communities directly, asking us to come in and establish these telecenters, because the community actually demands this. They need to have this. They need to access these services. And we're very happy to go in when we do our site surveys and we find that these are ideal locations. We conduct this and we establish these centers. To achieve broadband service availability to 95% of all urban, suburban, rural communities by 2016, I'm glad to say that we've already achieved 95% of the coverage through 3G services, and also happy to share with you that we had introduced LTE services last year, and at the moment we have more than 100,000 users already on 4G LTE services. So that's a significant growth. So when I was saying earlier that we would probably be reviewing this document next year, I think the next set of goals would probably be looking at taking this towards 100%, probably 99% or so. To ensure that broadband services remain affordable for all people in Fiji, again, the variety of services in the market, it depends what's your appetite. The appetite of the customer, you match it against what you're willing to pay. So there's always services. You can even, for those that are accessing broadband on your mobile devices, there are services on which you'd pay like $1.50 or $2 for a certain amount of data that you could use on your mobile phone. So for those that do not have a very high requirement or very big requirement for data, you have really you need maybe less than a gigabyte a day, and there are very affordable packages that are there as well. So on an ad hoc basis, you can access those. To support all academic institutions to have broadband access to, government is leading this through the GTC project again. The reason why we attach ourselves with schools is, firstly, there's a ready infrastructure that's in place. Secondly, the benefit of having the schools utilize this infrastructure during school hours is tremendous. During our surveys, we've been to sites where there's been school established for a number of years. They've got an IT lab, a IT teacher, and the students are actually learning computer science as part of their curriculum. Yet when you walk into the lab, you basically see 2 or 3 working computers, and you'd be surprised if even one of them is on the internet. So it's quite challenging. I was actually amazed at a lot of these students that are able to write programs on papers without actually trying it out on a PC. But yet they're able to do this. You know, the theory, they're able to study the theory and make it work. So just by equipping them with the resources that they require, it's amazing what they can do. So we're hoping that there's a big growth in this area as well. Government to lead the broadband evolution by delivering its services online over broadband. Now this is being led by the government ITC department, which is working on a lot of applications, programs that would be applicable to citizens, registration of births, businesses, etc. Now this would all be offered through the government eGov services. The Government Community Data Center project, again, that was launched by the PM in 2011. We had launched with 3 pilot sites spread across Fiji. There's one in Rekireki, if you're familiar with the layout of these towns and cities. There's one in Suva, and then we had one in Levuka, which is in the old capital, island of Ovalau. Currently, we have 25 sites in operations. All equipment, infrastructure, and staff is paid for by government, so the community does not incur a single cent in expenditure for accessing these services. Over the past 2 years, we've had over 90,000 users for these services. And the telecenters will offer ICT accessibility to more than 80,000 people in the surrounding areas. So this number is derived by, what we do is we take an immediate population count of areas that surround these ICT centers. So potentially you had about 80,000 people that can at any time go and access these centers. Reiterate the fact, no cost to the community to use and access. Services that are on offer include email, Skyping, printing. Printing, we have free printing as well for the communities, but it's limited to a certain number of pages, just to ensure no one actually comes in and takes advantage of these free services. We also have a volunteer that's on site to assist people who come in to use these services. Not everyone is familiar with using a computer from day one. So we have a volunteer that assists them. Current model is to coincide with schools because of ready infrastructure, labs, and the availability to students to use these services during school hours as well. And these same students in the evenings then come in with their parents and they introduce them to these services. Now, future priorities would be looking at awarding the contracts for universal service subsidies, investment into a spectrum management system. Like while we are cleaning up the spectrum through our appropriate band plans, there will be a requirement in very future where we'll need to invest in a automated software that allows us to conduct basic analysis such as interference analysis. So we're looking at investing into that in the very, basically within the next year. Implementation of the DTV migration. You'd be familiar with the migration from analog to digital services. The benefits of this would be, first of all, the model in which government is doing this, we're establishing a single platform for this platform. And then all the existing broadcasters would be given space on this infrastructure to come through, and basically they become broadcasters and they don't have to rely on maintaining infrastructure for their transmissions. So eventually we will end up with a single set of infrastructure with redundancy built in, of course, to see that the services don't go down if there is like some sort of a disruption. An opportunity here would be that the multiplex allows you to have more stations or more channels on the service. Currently we are free to air. We have about 3 channels in Fiji, national channels. We're expecting that this will grow substantially once the new DTV platform is in place. Further strengthening of the regulatory framework. In addition, as the demands for ICT services are growing, we also need to clean up from the view of the regulator, address some loopholes or gray areas. We're doing that through developing additional policies and guidelines, some of which are listed. Alternative dispute resolutions, staff consultation guidelines, consumer code and regulations, code of practice, and equipment type approvals. The reason for an equipment type approval is easier for people to really bring in equipment without the need to go through the regulator's office every single time. So you have a list of equipment that's ready. It's placed at the port of entry, and once this comes in through customs, if they fall on the list, then really you don't need to have any additional permits to bring these things in. Some of the areas of interest for foreign investors would be outsourcing opportunity for spectrum management and interference analysis. As you would know, equipment for spectrum analysis is quite specialized and very expensive. There's potential if a company is established, or a company that supplies this equipment on for example, even on a loan basis to the telecommunications sector generally, because even the telcos themselves don't invest in this high-tech equipment. At the moment, TEF has a few of this, what we call spectrum analyzers, and each time there's some disturbance in the field, then TEF actually goes down with its spectrum analyzer and then assists the mobile companies to figure out what the disturbance is. Now there is a potential that if a company is established a setup where this equipment could be loaned, because otherwise the alternative for us is really to loan it from abroad. At the moment, there's no companies in Fiji that hold this equipment, or we can access it from them through loaning or even purchasing for that matter. General supplies of ICT products, you would be aware, I think you've already been either briefed by Firka or you'd be probably today, of the taxation regime when it comes to ICT products. It's quite attractive, so that's another area. Ministry and regulators obtaining specialized spectrum monitoring tools through loaning facility. I've already spoken with that, linked to part 1. General business process outsourcing in the ICT sector. We had a number of call centers that were established that took significant advantage of government's liberal taxation regimes. In the areas of broadcasting, government DTV platform, this will be completed by the end of 2015 and will offer potential broadcasters a platform. I thought I'd just put this here for your reference, and if anyone's interested, we'd be happy to talk about this further. You could get in touch with the ministry. Some of the requirements when we that are there for broadcast are, you need to specify whether your business would be commercial or non-commercial basis, as well as whether you would be covering the region, particular region, or a national coverage. Content and program standards, like we'd rather have programs that the reason why we ask for schedules really is that we would want to minimize issues where there are a lot of repetitions. Like some of these broadcasters might have content for say 3-4 hours and it's just played back every 4 hours for the rest of the day. So we'd like to minimize that. Our consideration is to give it to broadcasters that are able to offer fresh content and also varied content according to different listenerships or viewership that you have. Details of STLs and other transmission links to be provided. So where far as possible, engineering to be provided when you apply for these licenses. You should also specify the intended coverage of your services around the country. And of course, you need to obtain from government the appropriate spectrum license and operating license. Now, they have their own specialized set of requirements, and again, we are willing to assist you further on this should you require further assistance from the ministry. Requirements for telecommunications providers, type of operations and nature of telecommunications business. Open license, we've discussed that initially as well, that's possible. Operating license is also at the prerogative of government. If someone is interested in establishing a service, a high level approval from government would probably be the first step for that. Necessary infrastructure is required for the operation, so we would discourage the establishment of what we call an MVNO, or where someone comes in, establishes a platform or business that runs on an existing platform or existing telecommunication service providers network. And again, you need to have the appropriate service license. This is a qualification I'd like to make with regards to the earlier slide. There are currently media ownership laws in Fiji which states that foreign ownership of media organizations would be about 10%. And then you need to have local ownership of up to 90% as well. All right. Thank you. With that, I've come to the end of the presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Thank you.